Alright, so, it has been an interesting year. Originally, I was going to do a short little summary without too much detail, but that's really impossible. Everything's a little bit intertwined. So last December, I was fresh out of a divorce. My ex-wife kept the vehicles, and I bought a junker off a guy's front lawn in Texas. Dry-rotted tires, ant infestation. It was in rough shape. I put a lot of money into it, but not as much as buying a new car. This is far more relevant than a tangential complaint, but more on that later. As a result of the unhappy marriage, I had given up on ever having a family. I attempted to find fulfillment through a lot of various efforts, and one of those efforts was spending a good amount of time talking with a lot of friends I had online, jokingly referring to myself as DadBot, while offering wisdom, guidance, and support through whatever struggles life brought their way. There was one friend in particular who was struggling with a lot. I often helped her face her depression and was a primary source of positivity for her. Again, relevant shortly. About a year ago, I moved 1,320 miles, or 2,124 kilometers, from Texas to Michigan in 2 steps. First, I drove the car up to get the apartment keys. Then I returned with the moving truck to find the car had all of its rubber cracked by the first freeze. It cost me about $2,500 to get the junker running again. In March, my online friend revealed to me the big secret she had been forbidden to share. Her best friend online was actually her husband, but he wanted her to lie to everyone and say she was single. She expected the truth to change something in our friendship, but I was genuinely confused when she asked me, "So this information changes nothing?" And I responded with, "Why would it?" It seemed her husband had convinced her that everyone online would only be nice to her because they wanted something in exchange. That was more or less what broke everything. I was a kind person on the internet, thousands of miles away, who only ever asked her to take care of herself, asked her to rest when she was tired, asked her to make sure that she was eating enough, asked her to believe in herself. A true friend. I can't directly comment on any behavior her husband exhibited behind closed doors, since I wasn't there, but I know what he was like while we were both moderating her Twitch streams. Before I learned he was her husband, the other moderator had very clear intention. I made every effort to protect her from creepers, while he got irritated if I interfered with someone who was giving her money. I offered positive encouragement while he made snide jokes. I responded to his referring to me as her daddy by saying, "I'm nobody's daddy, I'm DadBot." And he made the comment, "She can have a daddy and a DadBot." The worst, though, were the comments about making porn and how Pornhub pays better than Twitch, despite it clearly making her uncomfortable. Once I learned he was her husband, it truly didn't change anything. The point where I felt anything beyond indifference toward him came later. Regardless of what her husband was like, all I wanted was for her to find happiness and confidence. Unfortunately, I likely bear significant blame for her mental breakdown. She shared with me that he had been denied disability for his irritable bowel syndrome, after trying to get on it for 3 years. I spent the next several hours, while she was working a night job, researching Canadian disability. I sent her a document that I had prepared with all the information I could find on the official processes for disability, appeals if warranted, and since I didn't know whether or not irritable bowel syndrome could actually be considered a disability, I ended the document with information on finding employment that facilitates one's disability, and a personal statement that she could share with him, offering him encouragement as someone with a gastrointestinal-related disability myself, and tips on different employment opportunities he could seek that would likely be manageable despite his toilet-related needs. This, she said during her breakdown, was more effort than he ever put into his own disability claim. Next thing I knew, she was asking for me to call her. My first question, naturally, was, "Are you all right?" And her response concerned me. She wasn't sure what was real. She just knew she had to escape. She had called her estranged sister and father during her breakdown, and they came in the middle of the night, to pick her up from her night shift job. She had been so isolated from everyone else in her life that a kind internet friend, thousands of miles away, was the only person she actually trusted to assure her that she was alive and that the world was not a simulation. She told me that she ran away from her husband, that she threw her old life away. She then confessed her love for me, and my immediate reaction was, okay, let's put a pin in that, for now. I helped her calm down and tried to discuss reconciliation with her husband. Then she began to tell me more and more about her marriage. But the thing that mattered most to me during her time of crisis was making sure she was safe. The most alarming detail was how she spoke about her husband. She didn't know it was real, but she knew he scared her, and that she had to escape his control. While her sister and father went to work, I continued speaking with her. Around 12 hours after her breakdown, her husband messaged me on Discord. I'm just gonna read that entire conversation now and add a little context as I go. He messaged me, again, about 12 hours after her breakdown. Hey, I think we need to talk. So I responded with, alright, what's up? He told me, I would like to know what she said to you last if that's okay. She abandoned her cats with one sentence to live with someone who was abusive. I figured this was less intrusive than calling your phone. I responded with, things appear to be incredibly complicated. Apparently she hashed things out with her father, and he and her sister assured her that much of the trauma was apparently her mother mentally conditioning her. And based on everything I know about her mother being a diagnosed schizophrenic who refuses treatment, and the emails that she has sent in the last several months being unhinged, I very much believe it. And based on her father and sister, I believe them way more than her ex-husband. Soon-to-be ex-husband. And then I told him, she apparently broke down and called the only other person she knows, aside from you, to pick her up from work. She intends to reach out to you once she's ready to discuss the pressures in life that overwhelmed her so much. She's safe. And then he immediately, well, not immediately actually, it's like 5 minutes later, 6 minutes later, 5 minutes later, tries to undermine the people who responded immediately to her crisis. Again, 12 hours later. Starts trying to undermine their credibility. And I'm not going to explicitly read what he's saying here, just because YouTube has policies on certain sensitive topics. But, he does not express any concern for her. He's just trying to discredit the people that actually tried to help her. And then says, a notice for a 3-hour long-distance call out of country wasn't my ideal night. Because his priorities were definitely in order. I responded with, it's understandable. I've been offering the lessons I learned through therapy and marriage counseling. She's trying to relax and watch the water. And then, again, a little bit more of the sensitive topic stuff. But I assured him that, she was safe. That was the key thing that I had focused on over the hours of talking to her. And he only commented on the 3-hour long-distance call because I was still on a call with her at that time while I was messaging him on Discord, or messaging with him on Discord. And she was calm, she was safe. And he, again, points to her trauma and says that doesn't offer much consolation. And I said she is completely calm and rational right now, with a shrug emoji. Then he said, I've spent almost every waking moment outside of work for 6 years with her. Trust me, I've seen her make rational decisions, and this isn't one of them. She's on the verge of a mental breakdown. And I told him, very genuinely, no decisions are being made, just calm conversation. She had the mental breakdown at work last night when a coworker offered to buy y'all groceries. Care to explain why she turned to her father and I? Seems odd she didn't reach out to someone closer. Don't get me wrong, making time to help people in need is what I do, but I'm very confused. He responded with, "It seems like that irrational decision I was referring to earlier. I've picked up the broken pieces and mended them together over and over, and I would do it again, unlike those who have shattered her. She wants to be strong by not including me, but then has to rely on others instead. I don't blame you, though. You haven't been watching this scene play out as long or in as much detail as I have seen. I will take the moment to say that 100% he was abusing her. There's no question to that. But even aside from that, if you think you've helped somebody and put them back together, but it's not long-lasting, then you haven't actually fully helped them. And they should probably be seeking help somewhere else. Perhaps in addition, but definitely somewhere else. Isolating somebody from everyone in their life that they've ever known and that they ever meet to keep them under your complete control is not helping them. Back to the conversation, I responded to that with, that didn't answer my question. Why her father and not someone else? Why is she talking to me and not someone else? And instead of admitting that she is isolated, instead of, confirming the fact that she had nobody else in her life to turn to, he says, her father, Stockholm Syndrome. You, a listening ear that's awake at 3 a.m. her time. So I pressed the issue. Who else does she have? Support network a little small? And he blames her for her isolation, saying she shut herself off from all her friends and her family abandoned her. So I pointed out, again, the simple concept that a family that abandons a person doesn't generally answer the phone in the middle of the night, then rush to the person's aid. So he again tries to discredit just tries to discredit her father's credibility. With really, because deadbeat dads leave their children young and try to make up for it 18 years later. That doesn't mean they were never abandoned. I said, no, of course not. But I asked about people other than her father. And he responded with, yes, she wants to talk to her sister because she's the only one to openly talk about their past. I responded with, okay, let me clarify. Why not someone other than the two people who picked her up? I would far sooner expect her to couch surf with a coworker. And so now he goes to discredit the only other people, with she's only been at her current job for a few months, and her coworkers aren't exactly in stable situations. So, at this point, it's very clear that he is just trying to force her back into his sphere of influence. Which she has been very explicit, despite not knowing what was real, and not even being certain that she was still alive. She knew she didn't want to be in his sphere of influence anymore. She knew she wanted to be away from him. And so, I just told him reaching out to the sister who's open about their trauma is a far more rational decision than so many alternatives. The idea that she's running around making terrible, reckless choices is ridiculous. She's safe right now, physically, mentally, and emotionally, so no need to worry till she is ready and able to face her life again. And he stopped responding and blocked me on Discord. He banned me from the Discord for her Twitch streams and removed my moderation from her Twitch streams by accessing her account, which he had full control over. So, it's pretty clear from that. he wasn't too concerned for her. He was concerned for her being free. But, again, it wasn't my life. I was just trying to make sure she was safe, and that at the end of the day, at the end of everything, I wanted to make sure she was happy. So, after that interaction, I reluctantly agreed to be her boyfriend, in part so that nobody with ill intent would take advantage of her while she was so vulnerable and scared, escaping that husband. To be bluntly honest, I had no intention at the time of actually dating her. Again, I was fresh out of a rough marriage, and I wasn't sure I ever wanted to date again. Meanwhile, she didn't even realize how much he had been hurting her until I expressed concern over his actions towards her. She had been so conditioned by her mother and by her husband that even things that she, in her gut, knew was wrong, like him sneaking gropes to make her uncomfortable while his family had their backs turned, or sometimes when they probably saw it, and then making her feel bad for feeling conscious. She told me about that not even as a thing he did wrong, just as one of his weird things that he did, that she didn't even understand was not normal. And there were so many things that she didn't understand was not correct. She didn't understand that consent still applies in a marriage. So, unsure how I could really help her from thousands of miles away, and knowing how alone she felt, I reached out to a few friends in that corner of Canada, and one of them, let's call him P, was able to call and speak with her. P, too, was concerned for her, but felt the family was handling the situation. Still, throughout my new girlfriend's time of crisis, she insisted that she needed to see me. She needed to know I was real. And since she appeared currently forced between two potentially abusive parties, I immediately scheduled a flight and informed her that I would be there in 3 days. I insisted we meet at a coffee shop. I intended to meet her father and sister to assuage my concerns and, if able, get her in contact with local law enforcement and/or mental health professionals. The conversation that finally prompted her father and sister to cut me out of the picture was when I explained I was flying in to meet her and suggested going to the police for help getting things sorted. Her father demanded I not speak with her or contact him again, so I waited, but I was not made aware of any new developments. 2 more days passed and the day of my flight came. So, not sure if she was truly safe, and not knowing if anyone else would get her in touch with, again, law enforcement or mental health professionals, I flew 5,080 miles, or 8,175 kilometers round trip. My first intention, since I had given her father my passport information and the airport I was flying into, was to be detained upon arrival, and tell the authorities everything I knew about the situation. My second intention was to be around in case the situation worsened, or in the event she, once more, reached out to me without feeling she could trust anyone around her. When I wasn't detained upon entering the country, I was confused. I considered going straight to the police to share what I knew, but I wasn't sure if that would help her or cause more problems for her. I reached out to P again. They graciously spent most of an evening chatting with me and confirming that my sort of girlfriend was safe and being helped. It was during those days that I wrote the script of the previous video, while waiting and thinking and debating with myself what I should specifically be doing aside from standing by and hoping things turned out okay. I landed back in Michigan, still not knowing anything. I didn't hear from her again until she was allowed a phone in the hospital. That first night we could speak, she was afraid. After I was cut out of the picture, she had lost her grip on reality completely and fell into psychosis. But at the hospital, she was now medicated and recovering, and understandably overwhelmed by everything that had happened. She told me that speaking with me was comforting, so I offered to read a book to her until she fell asleep. I asked if there was a genre she preferred, and she said, "What about romance?" I looked at my bookshelves and laughed, saying, "The closest I have to a romance novel is The Princess Bride." I proceeded to read until she fell asleep, and whenever I was going to stop reading, I waited to see if she stirred. She did, several times, but every time I continued reading, she stopped tossing and turning. Finally, when she didn't react to the silence, I put the book away for the night and ended the Discord call. The next night, I offered to read to her again, and she reluctantly accepted, not wanting to be a bother. I started from the beginning again, and she stopped me, asking why I wasn't continuing from the place I stopped. So I told her I was starting from the place that she probably remembered from before she fell asleep. I proceeded to read the beginning of The Princess Bride to her every night, until she finally managed to stay awake long enough to actually hear some of it. with me marking the pages where I would stop each night whenever she fell asleep, and sometimes not moving the bookmark for nights in a row. It only took us 4 months of nightly reading for her to hear the entire book. I enjoyed every moment of it. So, she also, during her hospitalization, shared that her sister-in-law and husband tried to visit. She still didn't know exactly what she wanted or what was going to happen, but she knew she didn't want him near her. Her sister-in-law gave her a plush dinosaur, which she instantly named Vinny. It is the greatest honor I have ever received. Her husband, on the other hand, left the box. She began to open it on a video call with me, but I suggested she look through everything he had put in it on her own. And she still wanted to talk to me after. I said that would be okay. Once she called back, she angrily showed me the contents, including an iPod he bought with her money, every card she had ever made for him, and a page torn out of her diary. I offered an ear as she told me about how he never appreciated anything, and that everything in the box just made her even angrier that he never cared about the things she did for him until he could use them to try to get her back under his control. I suggested she write out how she felt and what she was thinking about everything, and then call him and express herself clearly. Wanting my opinion after she wrote it out, I reluctantly agreed to hear what she intended to say. She very clearly stated that she wanted a divorce. I realized, based on the wording and sentiments, it was very much warranted. I assured her that she didn't need to change a word because there's no such thing as finding better words when you speak from the heart. Speaking with her after the crisis, I finally believed fully that her husband was a terrible person and that reconciliation was completely impossible, if not inadvisable. I finally accepted that I would pass the incredibly low bar of being a better partner for her. To once more be bluntly honest, I imagined she would come to her senses and realize she could do far better than me after she was free and recovered from everything. I was more than happy to play house until then, but always reminded her that healing was the highest priority. For all of April, we spoke every day as she was finally released from the hospital and stayed with one friend then another. She constantly worried about being a burden to people. She was continuously afraid that they would get sick of her and she would have nowhere to go. Worth noting, the friends that I'm mentioning are friends she made that she didn't realize cared about her, that she didn't realize were friends, that she had met out and about town, being herself and making people smile. part of the thing that the call from P did was really get through to her that people did care. I lost my place in the script.
I love you.
I love you too. Right, all of April. So, she was continuously afraid that the people she was staying with would get sick of her and that she would have nowhere to go. She was terrified of losing her mind again, and I assured her that she would never be homeless as long as I had a roof to share. But I made it clear that that was a last resort, and that relocating thousands of miles into another nation is probably not a reasonable plan. But I did agree to come visit her as soon as I was able. So in May, I drove the same junker 2,561 miles, or 4,120 kilometers, to meet her in person for the first time. After a wonderful spinning hug and our first kiss, she and the friend she was currently staying with felt comfortable with us going camping. We stayed in a tent at a campground at the edge of town, enjoying nature and discussing the plans for while I was in town. This is where the expense and condition of my vehicle becomes relevant to the story. Within the first week of the visit, a rod dropped and punched a hole through the oil basin. It was a total loss, but not the kind that car insurance companies care about. So, it was unfortunate. But I couldn't be happier that it happened. She saw that I truly did stay calm whenever lives weren't in danger. It, in part, put into perspective exactly how meaningful my concern was during her crisis. It also helped simplify some things, since, at the time, the friend she was staying with decided she needed her guest room back. I finally met her father and sister, both of whom were still reticent to trust me, and both of whom were still trying to recover from the time of crisis. With her father's assistance, we relocated from the campground to his backyard, and got my possessions out of the dead vehicle to store at his place until we got things figured out. There was a partially finished room in the basement, completely filled with junk. Luckily, the cats had dealt with the rat infestation. And by the end of May, I had helped the family finish making the room into a cozy bedroom for her. When able, we would take breaks from emptying out and fixing up the basement room to go on hikes with her father. She realized he was bringing her back to all the places that they went when she was a child, before the divorce that left her with her mother and isolated her from the rest of the family. His demeanor toward me changed somewhat quickly, not least of which because he saw how happy she was, and heard the words of encouragement I always spoke to her. For a final fun adventure before I departed to fly back to Michigan, her father brought us to Salt Spring Island. We had a great day, went to a street festival, and were waiting for the ferry off the island when I got a chance to speak with him as she rested in the vehicle. I told him very clearly that I was just intent on her being comfortable and happy. I assured him that I would get out of the way when someone better came along. He turned to me with a smile and said, "I don't think there is anyone better for her. I hope you marry my daughter." Still processing what he had just said, I got back in the vehicle with her and I said, "I think your dad just proposed to me." I certainly couldn't disregard it anymore when I told her the exact exchange and she told me it was obvious. I don't believe in soulmates, but I respect her freedom to. All I know was that I had no further doubts or reservations. If she ever wanted to be with someone else, it would only be because I no longer deserved to be with her. Nothing more. I landed back in Michigan and got back to my apartment there, intent on finding my way to the Pacific Northwest as soon as possible. Home was no longer home, whenever I thought of how far away she was. So, in July, to reference the Snow Patrol song, I found a map and drew a straight line over rivers, farms, and state lines. Meaning, I broke my lease in Michigan to move 2,021 miles, or 3,253 kilometers, to Spokane, Washington, so I could be close enough to visit regularly. I've been spending about half my time with her and half her time with me, and there's a lot of time, there's there's a lot up in the air and a lot of bumps to make it over before the road smooths out, but I firmly believe we're heading toward a happily ever after. Especially once the divorce is finalized. So that's the story of the year. That's what that was all about. And as with the last video, I made sure that she was fine with all that I was talking about before I gave any remote details. But we're doing good. Anything you'd like to add?
I love you.
I love you too. But yeah, that's it for this crazy, crazy year. And I really don't have anything else to add yet. I'm sure I'll do more videos later because there's a lot. This is still the short version. I really don't know how to end this. What do you think?
I don't know. Well.
Well,
I guess
until next time,
Oh.
have a good one. How about that? Does that sound good?
But also just like, you could make another video talking about the things you've done this year.
Oh my god, we're going to talk about camping, we're going to talk about
Yeah.
hiking. There's a lot to talk about, but this is the summary. This is the important stuff. This is how we fell in love.
It is.
Bye!